Welcome to the Restoration Activation Project video commentary series. Hi, Marianne here. Hope you're doing well, and I'm glad you could be here with me. In the last three commentaries, I've been exploring the balancing process that's always going on within and throughout the whole of consciousness. Consciousness's process of balancing itself between its progressive and regressive expressions. And I've also contrasted some of the fundamental differences between progressive and regressive consciousness and creation. And this is all for the purpose of empowering you to make more progress on your conscious journey of awakening. In the last video, I began discussing and exploring self-responsibility in the context of this process and the conscious journey of awakening and so forth. So I hope if you haven't already looked at these videos that you will, because they're very helpful and they can help you make tremendous strides on your journey once you begin truly embodying and working in the flow of this process, as well as other processes that are a part of this. And one of the processes that goes hand in hand, if we seize the opportunity, in the unfoldment of this balancing process and being consciously aware of it and looking at things from that perspective, then we also come to really understand and begin to embody how all of these unfoldments, this balancing process, they're all nothing more than opportunities to keep not only assisting in the process of absolute experiencing itself and the assistance in the balancing process, but also as opportunities to expand and deepen our understandings of self and this reality, and how we are meant to be contributing to this and creation within this reality in this version of ourselves at this time. So I'll hope you'll take a look at those. And in the last video, I touched on how those of us on the conscious journey of awakening, although we are each unique individuals, unique expressions on a unique journey, that we have common ground. There is some common ground. And even if that common ground is expressed in myriad different unfoldments, we still share certain things in common. And one of the things that most of us have in common is we're either, if not currently experiencing it, but we have various stages along the way and could well experience it in other stages as we progress on the journey. That experience is the experience of aloneness, solitude. And what I'd like to explore today and open for your consideration is a number of ways to keep progressing in this solitude, in this phase of aloneness on your journey. And I'll open this exploration by saying that it can be an extremely challenging time for many of us. And we can fall into a state of loneliness and feeling as if something is missing from our lives, because it is. Other people, relationships, But what I want to share with you today, my intention is that this information will help you transcend that, to learn from this experience, and to keep moving forward, and to see this experience as the gift that it is, the opportunity that lays before you in this experience. And, you know, some or a lot of what I say, I'm sure, has passed through your conscious thoughts, that you know some of these things, but have you actually put them into practice, so to speak? First of all, just knowing that others are experiencing this. Choose to allow that knowledge to be of some comfort, in the sense that this is just a part of this journey. How could it not be? If we're growing and moving, which is the journey of awakening, is a process of movement, self-evolution, and growth, then things will change. And part of those changes, for many of us, entail people stepping out of our lives. We step out of their lives and circles. Relationships explode, or they just phase out. They just sort of wither and die on the vine, so to speak. But those are all indicators of movement. Now, granted, some of these things, these kinds of things, happen to people that aren't on a journey of awakening. It's just part of the constant movement and ever-changing nature of consciousness. But on our journeys, it's usually directly related to a few things. We've either made conscious decisions to step out of a relationship, or because we've made certain new or different choices, someone else has decided to step out of the relationship. Perhaps, and this is one of the other common ground things I touched on last week, perhaps as a result of your phase of wanting to share information as a sort of a tyro on this journey. And we've all been through that to some extent, all of us, or excuse me, most of us. Again, I'm speaking in terms of common ground, and this does not apply to everybody in every situation. I'll keep saying that for those of you that are new, that aren't familiar with me and where I'm coming from. All right? So it happens to most of us. It just does, in some form or fashion, as a result of, again, sometimes because we've been trying to impose the knowledge that we've acquired, even if our intentions are the best. You know what they say about intentions. Good intentions. Perhaps that's one of the reasons, or the reason, that another is no longer in your life, or others. You know, I'm one of those that have, and not just because of sharing information, but I'll get a little bit more into that later, kind of my own experience. But we find ourselves in solitude for big chunks of time during the course of our lives, and during the course of our days or our evenings or whatever. One of the things one of the first things that we can look at, well, I'll tell you what, even before that, I'm going to back up a little bit. Now, it is always all right to seek out contact with others, as long as that's being approached from the perspective of progressive consciousness. And what I mean by that it's not merely to satisfy ego's sense of loneliness. And again, that's not a condemnation of that. Many of us have felt lonely. I can tell you that some of my loneliest moments, however, were when I was in the presence of others. That's the times that I have felt most lonely, separate and apart from some of the stages of my journey where I have found myself alone. Okay? So there's nothing wrong, and it's natural for most of us on this journey because of, some of the things we have in common, to want to be with other people, particularly others who are going through this process themselves. And sometimes those are the hardest people to connect with, because even if there are others that are no longer in our lives, some of these people, they don't just grow on trees. Most of them, in my experience, even though I have consciously sought them out in physical as opposed to virtual situations, most of those that I have seized or sought to make contact with turned out not to be what they presented themselves to be. And that's okay too. But so I'm not, throughout any of what I have to say in this commentary, I am not suggesting that you don't reach out. And even if it's reaching out to someone like me, doesn't have to be me, someone who's also doing this kind of work that you feel kind of a sense of connection to, just to talk to. I've done that. I've worked with other people, and one of the primary reasons being just to reach out to somebody else that I feel confident is on this journey. And that's okay. That's good. That's a good thing. But in terms of, I want to look into, but we can't be on the phone all the time, nor should we. Or Facebook or Skype or however we're connecting. And when we're connecting just for the sake of connecting, again, look into that, because, and I'll get more into that in just a minute too, but it's okay to have a desire to connect with other people. So I'm not saying that that's wrong or bad in any way just because you do find yourself in solitude. All right? Get it? Got it? Good. Okay. But when we do find ourselves in those situations, I have found it to be very helpful and empowering for beginners to see this as an opportunity to connect more deeply with core self, whole self. Think about it, you have more time to do that. When you look at it in those terms, okay, now I have this time. What am I going to do with it? And how can I use that to keep progressing on my journey? And any time you can connect and consciously keep that connection open and flowing with core self. I mean, that's about as valuable a use of that time as you could make it. Okay? But now stepping a little more, getting into a few more opportunities here. First of all, look at how the solitude came to be. In other words, what series of situations, circumstances, your choices, the choices of others, what sort of led you down the path to where you are now? And look at that through the lens of the balancing process. In other words, this solitude and the path that led to it are directly related to your journey. Period. So it behooves us to look at, to the best of our ability, to trace back the series of choices we made, choices others made, the situations and circumstances, and kind of how you got to. Even if you already kind of know how you did, but look at that consciously. Look at it through the lens of the balancing process, while also looking at it through the lens of what do I need to see to progress to the point where I do have, if this is what you desire, people in my life that I can deeply connect with. So awareness, open to that, and because you've been connecting more deeply with core self, ask what it is that you need to bring more into your awareness that you can use to keep more and more deeply connecting with core self and expanding and increasing your capacity to transduce will of core self, will of the whole of consciousness, and so forth. All right? Now, it's also extremely important that you allow yourself to feel whatever feelings are coming up for you in this solitude and aloneness. If you are feeling lonely, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling a sense of loss and grief? Of course you are. You're grieving even if the people that are now out of your life were people that there was a lot of friction because of the way you were moving, wasn't in alignment, it was in opposition to the paths of these others. You will still feel a deep sense of loss and need to go through a grieving process. Because in most cases, there was more, even if it's in sort of a perverse way, there was more to the relationship than just oppositional forces at work. In other words, that there were good times along with the not so good times. And you need to really, and if you're thinking, well, that's not the case, it was all bad, it was all awful, then you need to step back and take, or I should say step in and take a closer look, because it is equally valuable. And you might not be able to do this if you're still raw, if the relationship or relationships are just recently gone. But over time, start making yourself, taking time to look at the good as well as the bad. See both. Find balance in that. Stay balanced in that as a part of your conscious participation in the balancing process. Because when we focus either, not just on the focusing solely on the regressive aspects, but the progressive, huge imbalances can occur, and then we have deepened existing distortions, or we're creating more distortions. It's neither, you're out of balance if you're looking either through rose-colored glasses alone or dark shades alone. Seek both. And even if that good is, wow, I can learn so much from this primarily negative situation, negative relationship. You know, it was perhaps it was one of the proverbial two-by-fours that you needed to be hit over the head with to be able to step out of. Look at that and be grateful for that. Thank goodness. Thank consciousness. Thank core self for helping me propel myself the hell out of this. Look at that too. Do not allow yourself to drown in the negative. Keep every day. And I've been through this, where some very long time, intimate relationships, in particular family, suddenly out of my life. Major grieving process. Despite the negative, overwhelmingly negative aspects or characteristics of the relationships. But I knew I needed something deep inside was pushing me. And this was already when I was, kind of far along in my journey. But on a daily basis for months and months and months, taking time as many times a day as I could to just sit. And there are processes. I can help you learn some processes for doing this, because we want to be responsible in our release and be responsible administrators of that energy, but different ways to do that responsibly. Even when you're doing it alone, you still need to be responsible, because your experience and release of energy is a type of creation, because you are acting on. You're not acting through, but it is a type of creation, and there are ways that we can be really careful and be responsible, because we do not want to do no harm. We do not want to project that energy, direct it at other. And again, there's processes for this where we can address that emotion and even express that emotion, but in ways that do not directly send that energy to the other. And also not feed the hungry feeders that can't wait to get their hands on that energy. So there's ways to go about that where we are releasing experience and releasing responsibly. But I set aside, and it took months. I would just be crying up a storm. There was so much pent up energy of emotions, deep, deep-seated emotions that had only just come up here and there, that I'd only allowed myself to experience because of tons of conditioning, tons of programming, wearing blinders when it came to relationship with family. In other words, I had learned to apply or to step out of, I was at one time a poster child for blind compassion. And I had learned over the years to step out of that in all other relationships. But I still had blinders on when it came to family. And they were some of the worst, most abusive relationships of my whole life. So allowing yourself, it's important that you feel them, because you're not getting rid of those emotions and that energy unless you feel it. So this went on every day for months and months, and it was hard, particularly in the beginning. However, it did not take that long to transition to a place of, it's like, okay, I know there's still a lot there, and this isn't fun, but after each session, every day, multiple sessions, I felt better and better and better and better within just a matter of days, even though this took months. And I am sure that I still have some lingering traces, I know I do, of distortions to clear out around this. These were very traumatic. There were multiple relationships. So give yourself that gift of feeling and releasing. And if you're someone who has built up tons of armor, buffers over the years, and you are someone who has a hard time allowing yourself to experience or knowing how to go about it without feeling like you're totally out of control, please call me or someone else who does this work. Don't not do it because you don't feel you know how or don't feel like you trust yourself. Those are not legit justifications for not doing it. It's so important. Okay? And it makes such a huge difference. And the more you release, clear out, clear, in some cases, you know, if it was like me, it was years of stuff. Deep, excruciatingly painful. But after the first day or two, not only did I start feeling relief, it started clearing my capacity to be able to get a handle on all of this. to begin seeing the deeper opportunities for growth and learning in all of this. And getting back to aloneness, if we're having a deep struggle with aloneness, and we're actually feeling desperately lonely, then that is a very clear indicator of deep attachment to, ego identification with, and attachment to relationships with others. In other words, over the course of time, you fell into the trap, which we all do, of identifying and defining yourself to some extent by the people and relationships in your life. In contrast to identifying solely with core self and what you really are. So, quote, everybody does this. And that's part of what we're here to see about ourselves and make adjustments in that. And to start learning how to choose consciously which relationships. Now, every relationship can be a benefit if we see it through those lenses. However, serious-minded folk on the conscious journey of awakening, one of our things that we need to learn is conservation of time and energy. Being very, what are we giving our energetic currencies to? What are we investing in? And there's an article on my website that delves into that, and I'll put a link below. But what are we spending time and focused attention on? And what kind of a return are we getting on those investments? So serious-minded people on this journey, it's about being very conservative or conserving of your energetic currencies. Very prudent with that. Very prudent with your expenditures. Okay, so that's something that can be looked at. It's an opportunity to become stronger in that. Getting clearer about the kinds of relationships that would be of great benefit to you and the other, particularly yourself on this conscious journey of awakening. And of course, it's always your choice, my choice to make as to who we involve ourselves with in relationship. But for me, after a point, I finally realized, and I'm talking about not just family, but personal relationships. I was at a place some time back where I thought, okay, in personal relationships, I'm this awakening person, and I can see the value of all types of different creations, and I can work with and around and in the flow of that. It doesn't matter if the other person is on this journey or not. Well, for me, I learned that that was dead wrong for me in a personal, intimate relationship, my inner circle. Excuse me. So now from that, I learned to be very discerning about that. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn to be more discerning in that, in your choices of who you allow into your inner circle. Family, friends, more personal relationships, partnerships. And not in terms of judgment or condemnation of those who are not on this journey. You would be falling back into another pattern of regressive creation to do so. But a deep understanding and acknowledgement of where you may well be on your journey, to honor that, to trust that, and to get in the flow of that. And I can tell you too that it feels pretty weird at first, especially to those of us who, I'm an empath, an intuitive, and I've always been geared toward doing the best of my ability to help and to help uplift others, to the point of doing it from a place of blind compassion, as I mentioned earlier. So when you first step into that mode of setting boundaries, you can feel really weird or selfish, or it feels odd at first. Well, that's ego talking. That's ego. Ego likes things to be a certain way, and that varies from person to person. If you're somebody like me, ego liked me to be the way I was. It didn't like the big change at all. So I was being worked on by conditioning, all these different distortions around that for a little while. But it was pretty easy for me, personally, just happened to be, when it came to certainly around non-inner circle relationships, people just maybe 1 or 2 steps removed from inner circle. That was fairly easy for me. The challenge for me, the big challenge, was in the inner circle relationships. So, what distortion or distortions, perhaps beyond just ego identification and attachment, might have contributed to the relationship fallout or fallouts that you're experiencing? For example, again, I'll use myself. I had, and I didn't know how deep until everything sort of started crumbling. Deep false beliefs, deep conditioning around family and family relationships and what they're supposed to look like, and how I'm supposed to be in that or in those relationships. Mother, child, sibling, whatever. A lot of, and I know, I can tell you, most people have distorted, not all, most have extremely distorted beliefs and indoctrination around those relationships, around family relationships. And depending upon the nature and the characteristics of the individual, that sort of determines how it unfolds in your life. The characteristics of the individuals in these relationships, yourself and the others, as to how it unfolds and what it looks like. But the conditioning is deep. Now, humans, in our original makeup, the original full human, we are, in that sense, naturally, we were designed to be. We're social creatures, interactive, cooperative, connective by nature. So that's there for most of us on this journey, or a lot of us on this journey. But it's been twisted and distorted into perverse ideas, perverse, unhealthy identification with, connection to, attachments to these kinds of relationships. Which means that when they're not there, we're left feeling, in a lot of cases, completely disoriented. Where's our without a sense of, quote, stability, an anchoring point, when those relationships are suddenly gone. So that's a challenge to go through. But the opportunity is there for us to see, to understand that we, in some form or fashion, we're defining ourselves by and through these relationships. And to finally start releasing those old, distorted attachments so that we can see with clearer, fresher eyes the way we need to see relationship, whether it's family or not, but just a generally more balanced perspective of relationship. Another key learning for me, it was already something that was going on for me and within me, but was seeing aloneness and loss of relationship and people in my life as an opportunity to step into, more deeply into, self-trust. Trust of, and turning more fully to inner knowing, core self guidance. And I was never one, as an adult, I always had a mind of my own, so to speak. However, and I would seek the input and advice of others. But then, like I said, the older I got, the more I started tuning into myself. I always had the ability, as an intuitive and empath, very sensitive to that. But because of all the conditioning for an extended period in earlier years, I had totally disconnected myself from that inner knowing, having been deeply indoctrinated to look to other, to trust other more than I trusted myself. And I came into this world, I remember as a little bitty girl, just knowing things, remembering things. It's like, I've been here before. Even though everyone else was saying, no, you haven't. I knew I've been here before. So I just got to the point ultimately where I just stopped saying things and just kept it within. And over time, what that led to, distortions, and ultimately reliance upon input of other, at least to a degree, for me. So aloneness can be a hugely empowering time to start developing or redeveloping or self-trust. Just really start letting that flower, or if you've never really had a sense of that, to get rooted in that. And learning not only to listen to intuition, guidance, core self-guidance, but to hear what's really being transmitted. I think many of us are able to that we're getting, and we know we're getting guidance from core self, but and we're listening, but we tell ourselves that we're not, because we're not really wanting to hear what's being said or what's being transmitted. As I mentioned in the last video, core self, for the most part, does not communicate through talking. It comes to us, those communications come to us in myriad different ways. I think I'll make a commentary about that alone and communicating with core self in the not too distant future. But we just don't want to hear, we don't like what we're tuning into. So we tell ourselves that, oh, I'm not in connection with. And sometimes it's true, we have lost the connection, at least for a time. Or it's been so muted within us that it takes work to redevelop it. So self-trust, aloneness is a huge opportunity to work on that. And I don't mean self-trust in the sense of just self-reliance, but, and some of us, because we're so addicted to, we've been so conditioned and indoctrinated into a society that doesn't ever like us to be alone unless it serves their purposes. For the most part, they've crammed and pushed us into crowded cities, you know, or if you're not in a city, it's like really rural America doesn't exist anymore. I mean, the big wide open spaces are owned by government, private corporations, for the most part. The wide open spaces. Populations have been, for the most part, at least in the United States, crammed and pushed and crowded into certain chosen areas, because alone time is time. It gives us time to contemplate, to ponder, to look at and work with and on self and learn about self and come back into our own, restoring our original capacities and functionalities, such as things like, some special abilities many of us still have, even if they haven't, even if the individual hasn't awakened to these capacities yet, and they may not in this lifetime. But many of us, the mind-body complex that we're occupying holds in weight these various capacities, such as telepathy, remote viewing, a deep sense of intuition, empathy, self-healing capacities. And what better time to start exploring your energies and your capacities, in your own mind-body complex as part of the self-mastery work. It's like, wow, the more I clear, the more I move out, clear out distortions, get my mind-body complex fully, restored to its peak mental, emotional, physical functioning and capacities, and start working, doing the same thing with my energy centers, my 3 energy centers, mind, heart, and creational, and my overall energy field. And start working with that and experimenting with that. I can't think of many better ways to use my time, my alone time. But then all of this relates back to your desire and commitment to be doing this work in the first place. Because you can make the choice. You can either choose to feel miserable in aloneness, and again, I'm not judging, but it's a choice. Because if you are so miserable in that aloneness that you need to connect with somebody else, then you're responsible for making that connection. There are people out there with whom you can connect. So you can either choose to do that or not. It's your decision. And you can choose to use your alone time to delve more deeply into your awakening self-mastery process or not. It's entirely up to you. And I have the deepest of empathy for those of you who are going through loss of those deep inner circle relationships. Deep compassion for you. Been there, done that, doing that. Because this isn't a suddenly one day you're there, even though you've worked through most of it. It takes time to get to all the little subtle pieces and parts. And they'll show up for you, especially now as we're going through this, as we're in this time of transition between evolutionary cycles, end of cosmic energetic cycles, all these energies, these races and civilizations, various ones are leaving our reality, others are poised to come in. The energy system itself is going through a resetting, a recalibration, and all of this stuff is coming up. I know that myself, and I've talked to numerous others that are feeling as if everything's been sped up. I've also experienced the sense of timelessness more frequently. some other time glitches and all. I may have to make a commentary about all that too, about what everyone, a lot of people are calling the event. I'm going to address that too real soon. But all of these things are coming up. And if we're in a place of awareness that this is going on, then we don't keep getting blindsided by it. We just go, okay, holding on, holding on for the ride. More and more stuff's going to be coming up. I know this is going to be happening. And I am choosing to go with that flow and to see that huge opportunity for what it is. A sort of compressed, sped up version of clearing of distortions, identifying and clearing distortions and moving on, so that we are prepared. So the mind-body complex is prepared to go through this transition in whatever particular way this version of yourself, core self's will for this version of yourself to go through this transition. And getting more in tune with that, because the more we clear out, the more we can transduce core self and accommodate its will. All right. So being alone, being in solitude can be deeply challenging for many of us, but it can also be an amazing opportunity to make really big leaps and bounds on your journey. And to learn more about the balancing process and how that's playing out in your life, in your situations. And look at that and see. And it's like, and sometimes we figure things out like, wow, this, and I'm going to use the word karma here for a minute, that's a very common word in the spiritual communities, karma, and there's always a lot of people attach a label, good or bad karma. It's like, no. Balancing, and that goes beyond just this lifetime or our reincarnated lifetimes, but into whole self balancing, all the versions of ourselves beyond this reality, beyond this energy system, this solar system and universe. To contemplate that, it's like, wow, perhaps there's some balancing going on, and always knowing that you're not ever going to be able to see exactly in every situation what the hell is going on, because one person cannot understand all of that. But to just keep asking and contemplating, not as an escape tool, but with the express intention of expanding your awareness towards clearing out distortions. It's like, wow, okay, now I can let go of that. I don't need that anymore. And all of this also ties into attachments, and I will probably speak at length to attachments in an upcoming commentary. But even if it sort of chokes you at first or makes you feel queasy in the stomach to tell yourself this, if you're on the heels, freshly on the heels of losing another, and this can apply even to loss of other through death. Perhaps a significant person in your life left the mind-body complex. either in an expected way or a completely shocking, unexpected way. And you're dealing with that. All of these same things still apply. And it does come down to connecting deeply with core self, not letting ego get the best of you. Don't kick old ego out of the driver's seat, especially if you're telling yourself things like, you know, how can I be whole, or how can I function without this person in my life, kind of an attitude. Ego, 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 ego. Attachment. You allowed yourself to be defined by this other being, a relationship with this other person. And again, if you need help in this, don't suffer in silence, because I've done that too, and it can take you so far off track, off your journey so quickly. It's shocking how quickly we can be thrown off. Okay, I think on that note, I'm going to call it a wrap for this commentary. I hope it's been of benefit. And for those of you who have been watching these commentaries, if you haven't already, I hope you'll subscribe, not only here on YouTube, but on my website as well, because if you do, when you subscribe there, you'll be notified not only of these commentaries, but of my articles as I publish those, along with other resources that I'm publishing on my site. So I hope you'll do that if you're finding these of benefit, and to share, let others know, fellow travelers, those whom you think it is appropriate to share with about this information. There's a lot of people out there who, even if they haven't shared with you, that they're feeling extremely alone and lonely in this. That's one of the reasons that I do these videos. This has been hard for me. To watch these videos, you may not ever suspect that I'm an extremely, for the most part of my life, I've been an extremely introverted person. And when I decided to do this work in this way and go online with my work, so to speak, get off grid, or get back on the grid from an off-grid place of working, that I'm a writer. I'm a well-trained, I've been a copywriter, writing all throughout various different careers and professions that I've had along the way while doing this work on the side. And so that was just my natural choice of expression on a website. Well, fortunately, a couple of people from my inner circle, and it's a small circle these days, let me tell you, tiny, the inner circle. And they said, no, people need to see you. I said, okay, well, I'll do audios. And they said, no, people need to see you to get a sense of you and your energy. And it took a lot of work to muster up the courage to do this. It's still hard for me. And my point being, stretching and growing. If we're in a comfort zone, whether it feels good or doesn't feel good, whether it's a feel good or not feel good comfort zone, then we're not growing, we're not moving, we're not progressing. So looking at things and getting back to doing these video commentaries and what I was saying about being alone and so forth, is that I can't tell you how many times for me over the years when things like YouTube were around. When I first started my conscious journey of awakening, things like YouTube and all these different websites were nowhere to, they were not there yet. It was books and self and library and none of this, what we have today. And even when stuff did start coming online, it wasn't like it is today. You couldn't just type in 2 or 3 words and go, oh, okay, I've got this place and this place. But what I'm saying is that over the course of the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, connecting, hearing others, seeing other, sometimes in these places of aloneness and solitude, was of great help to me. Connecting with someone that I did feel a connection with. And the voice, even audio, was very, very helpful to me, supportive, helping me be self-supportive. So that's why I do it. This is not something that I have any training in whatsoever, and I'm sure you can tell that by the quality of the videos. I'm not an expert producer and maker of videos, but that's why I do it. That's why I stretch out, because I know that it will be of benefit to some, that some may well benefit from what I have to share. And so if you do know somebody else, even if they say that everything's, hunky-dory, they're doing great on the journey, maybe they're not, because a lot of people put that front up. So consider that in making your determinations of who to share this with or not share with, and when and if it's appropriate to share and so forth. All right? All right, until next time, take care on your journey. I hope you're making good progress, and it's good to be here with you. I feel like I am with you. Take care, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.